Well, g'day. Not a live video, but pre-recorded. I've been banned off Facebook for a few days for posting something. It's funny business, isn't it? Well, that's better. So I'll post this up, I guess, in a couple of days, but or maybe I'll put it on my YouTube one. So what I wanted to talk about, I had a discussion with somebody yesterday, or it might have even been this morning. Time's one of those things that sort of, I can't keep track of it anymore in my mind. It's always just the present, but in the willingness to give what residual stories I have a new purpose, and in repurposing those, the idea of time as a way in which to transfer understandings or insights into the curriculum for mind training to bring about that shift in consciousness becomes helpful, I suppose. I don't really know. And one of my teachers, Ted, put up a beautiful simple post the other day declaring that words are post-schism, and there are no words thusly to describe the experience of reunification or the experience of oneness with self. And having to take on board the nature of a full spiritual transformation, which is a transformation of the mind, having to take that on board on faith is something that, well, firstly, faith is its own reward. The more leaps of faith you make, the more faith you get. And the stronger you become in your faith, until finally faith is no longer really even required. You just can't deny the nature of the support that you find yourself gifted with divinely. But until that experience dawns on the mind, there's no other reference point in the mind for a non-temporal experience. And I've spoken to lots of people over the years that have had near-death experiences and things like that, where they've like left their body and gone to other realms and hovered around and done all sorts of, like the stories are endless and diverse. But the nature of the illumination of the mind, there is no body. There's no body to leave. There's no story. There's nothing to return to. And this experience is one that can easily lose significance because the ego will corrupt the integrity that you are attempting to forge around the importance of that experience to yourself with lesser experiences, with experiences that really only verify the body and the transient journeys of the body. So one of the things that I like with A Course in Miracles is the blocks. Right? There are 4 blocks, and everything that you come across in the world in your own particular association with your temporal vibration here, you'll be able to reflect back on one of each of these 4 blocks and know where it is you're at with the removal of that block in your own mind, and which is always going to be divinely, of course. But in saying that, remembering also that each of those blocks is nothing more than a way for you to discover a relationship that you're having with yourself, miscreatively perhaps at first, in the idea of the overall block of separation from source. And it's because you don't have an experience in your mind that you can refer to of source that you need blocks pointed out to you that reflect the nature of that idea of separation, so that you can begin to tangibly work your way through the release of the mind from its habitual responses that continually verify and engage in the blocks that were initially set up to maintain the idea of separation. So one of the blocks that I've been looking at lately, and not looking at a lot, it doesn't seem to have any emotionality, you know, and the emotionality is how you know where you're really at with things. If you have a reaction, an emotional reaction, the emotionality is always something that you can't avoid. If you get angry or if you get upset about it or whatever, you can't deny you felt that. You can try and fob it off, and you can try and spiritualize it and give it a concept, and oh no, I'm okay, all of that sort of rubbish. But the bottom line is, well, you had the reaction, so therefore the block is still in place, and it doesn't matter how lofty you want to spiritualize the way out of it, use it, you know. So the third block, which is the fear of death, is the one that I've been looking at a little bit lately. And as I said, I don't have a great deal of emotional response to that idea of that block. But I also have recognized the second block, that the belief the body is valuable for what it can offer, is one that really now has no harmonic to it at all, if that makes sense. I just don't relate, I don't associate with the idea of what the body is valuable for, other than those functions the body is capable of that stand witness to the repurposing of its use, you know. So which in this case is making this video. So in the idea of, and this is I'm getting there I'm getting back to the thing. In the idea of the conversation I was having with my friend, who is a devotee of another particular path, we were discussing the idea of death and reincarnation, and even within the framework of the dream, what that is to become remanifest again and again as an entity avatar, I guess, if you want to call it that, going through that whole shit fight from birth to death again and again and again, and under the idea that you're just energy, really. You're just a vibration, and that vibration harmonizes in a certain way. You're a frequency, and you operate on and as a frequency, or within and as a frequency of light. And the transformation of mind, of course, being the mode whereby that frequency can be increased, so you no longer have to participate in the frequency that maintains the physical avatar and move on in the journey of the soul. But the idea of death as something that represents, let's say, a doorway to a new episode, or like the final idea of death, that most people have that classic idea. I mean, death as in a spiritual sense, is any idea that's not completely happy. Any thought that doesn't bring you joy is the harbinger of death, you know. So in that sense, there is still work to do. But in the idea of the total death of the body, or the laying aside of the body, I had to look at the it's really hard to talk about. I had to look at the purpose in the transition of being able to look at it, right? So when you're undergoing a transition of the mind, and you're given, like as Jesus says in the Course in Miracles, these 4 blocks, so you can have some kind of reference points within the framework of your temporal association to begin to backdrop your progress on and stuff like that. Looking at the idea of death, or confronting that idea of death, right, is something that is not only liberating and frees you up from the fear of the imminent posturing of that final moment, right? And it's like when you've confronted that idea of death, you've got nothing to lose, you're free, right? It's the fear of it that keeps you bound to the cause and effect nature of the safety mentality that, hey, come here, Pedro, yeah. Pedro's gone cliff walking. I didn't know he could do that. It's the fear of death that keeps you bound to those cycles. So if you think of the approach to looking at the idea of death, or confronting the idea of death as a threshold, once you've crossed that threshold, it's done. Okay. And then there's this recognition in the mind, oh, well, there's nothing to fear because I confronted it, I saw it, and I saw myself from the other side of it, and it wasn't anything, right? So all of the fear that maintains the distancing between that total willingness to look at that idea of death becomes nothingness, because it is nothingness. And of course, in my experience of myself as this entity, this avatar thing here, in this what we call our life, in my experience of my life here, there have been several moments where the confrontation with death has been unavoidable and somewhat quite obvious. And drowning and attempting to hang myself at an earlier age was just two of those. But I didn't actually drown, but I in the moment where I was rescued by my friend, in that moment of going underwater and realizing I couldn't get myself to the surface, there was the momentary realization that, this is it, this is the end. I'm drowning, this is the end of my life. And I can't remember the exact thinking in that moment, but it was very peaceful, and there was this acceptance and totality to it that realized that it would only be the body. I don't know if that makes sense. It would only be the body that underwent that transition from the nothingness that it sprang to the nothingness that it was returning to, as an idea of, let's say, a revolving door of reincarnation going on to the next thing. But unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, I don't know, I was rescued and dragged to the surface by my hair. Anyway, it's funny, but I just wanted to try and put my thoughts together out there about that, because in the idea of looking at death as one of the obstacles, the fear of death, personally, there is a great peace and a great surrender with that idea within me that at one point in my life would not have been there. There would have been this kind of, maybe not terror, but this sort of mild concern about it. And I guess with the way things are in the appearance of things at the moment, with the COVID and everything else, and it's in the news every minute of the day, even though 60 million people die a day around the world and 70 million are born, or whatever, it's something ridiculous like that. But even though, those figures, it's still presented in the mainstream media as how many people died and that. And so it's inescapable, that confrontation with that idea of death. And it brings up a lot of anxiety just to be around people, television presenters and so-called professionals and doctors who are all talking about the mortality of the body constantly now, and attempting to enforce some kind of structure of safety to prevent that idea of the demise of the body through whatever it is, in this case the COVID. It could be an asteroid, or it could be a war, or it could be anything, an earthquake. But so I just wanted to put it out there that once you look at that idea of death, as I have done and as I continue to do, and death, mind you, is the preceding block to the fear of love, and we'll get to that in another video. But once you've looked at that idea of death and confronted it in your heart and in your mind, and truly confronted it, and you're no longer afraid of it, there becomes this reference point in your thinking for that confrontation having been made, that you can begin to build these synapse responses with every time that something shows up and you're confronted with that idea again and again and again. Right now, the specificity of the confrontation in this particular regard that I'm using as the example is COVID. But even if you were to look at this piece of stone, this body, the confrontation is always with death. I'm confronting death. This isn't a stone. This is an idea unlike my creative reality that represents to me the notion that all things in this world are born and die. Right? when you begin to take it on board and begin to see things in that light, you begin to be able to cross-reference those synapse connections in your thinking and rebuild and restructure your thinking in order to exclude, let's say, fearful premise from the equation, and remind yourself and rekindle within yourself the relationship with your true nature, which is that you are spirit, you are eternal and whole and perfect, you can never die. And that's going to be probably the more confronting thing. All right, well, that's it, I guess. I just wanted to put that there. I just had it in my mind to make a little video about that, and just see where it goes. I mean, Jesus says in the Bible, those who look upon God or those who look upon the face of Christ will never see death, and will never look on death. And for my own self, and as a reference for a witness for you, if you have not yet had that experience, I've had that experience, and you can safely use my experience as one of the references in your own thinking. So when you're confronted with these ideas of death, you can pinpoint the synapse responses in your mind that, you know, like these memory packages that will tell you, hang on a minute, I once watched a video of this guy who told me that he saw the face of Christ in all his brothers and had an experience of direct union in God, and has no association with death any longer. This being my last life, let's say, last incarnation, where hopefully I'm being useful in helping to pave the way for others and for those who have not yet even begun to have their incarnation here in this time zone. And just with that, I was talking with my friend Tina Tyler. You can find her in my friends list on Facebook, TYNA Tyler. I was saying to her the other day, in relationship with, in regards rather to the idea that ideas are increased by sharing. These are useful ideas. These are fresh new ideas, spiritual ideas that you can safely use as reference points to begin to restructure your own thinking. So just as you may perhaps find them useful, please tag others in these posts and things and share them, because you never know what's going to be helpful to anyone. And I would really appreciate it. And we're attempting to raise the vibration of consciousness here more and more and more. So whatever little you can do, please do it. Please be about your Father's business, even in that regard. And if you think it's too confronting for other people, then as I've had it told to me that it is, then I would simply suggest maybe just don't judge other people or where they're at, and just simply put it up and let those who need to find it from you, because you're offering this as a vibration, whether it's your own expression or mine or whatever. It's the one expression of truth, and your own tribe, your own group, your own cast and crew of your own play are waiting for you, literally waiting for you to stand up and declare your Christhood, to stand up and say, hang on a minute, I'm not a body. Okay? We're literally living in the resurrection now. The time of reincarnation is done, but the backlog of that old script is something that is still active in your mind until you begin to fully take on board and step into your repurposed role as co-creator, which is what you actually are, not this body that you actually aren't. So I hope that makes sense. Anyway, you probably noticed that everything's on a bit of a crooked angle here on the photo, on the film. I forgot my little tripod thingy today, so I'm just resting the phone on a rock. So it's all given. It's just beautiful. All right, I love you. Thank you. Peace. And it's New Year's Eve, so Happy New Year, whatever the hell that means, I really don't know, but Happy New Year to all you people that still live by integers in time to construct some kind of linear reference for your experience. Peace.